IVM.
Hello and welcome to Simplified. This is Tony, your host, who's now been made host through the Host Amendment Act by virtue of being in 3 episodes back to back. Along with me, I have Chuck and Sriket. Say hi.
Hi. Yes. This is like a hostile takeover. I feel
Get used to it, India.
I feel like Hooli employees.
So anyway, Tony, yes, is guesting with us. Till he can provide his documents.
And Naren still somewhere in the north of Bombay. We have assumed the wilderness has claimed him.
Or he wasn't able to provide documents enough to appear on the show.
Aha. Moving right along. BJP rocks.
Rocks is right only. Anyway, we should start talking about many topics which is not related to anything related
we are
to home.
assuming this is going to be the last of our year-end recap episodes.
And not because of that intro, but because we run out of topics.
I think the hat is looking suspiciously empty now.
And the year is about to end, to be honest.
I know.
I'd really hate it. I feel damn sad for these guys who make listicles starting mid-November, man. Like, they're still, good, one by something of the year left.
Or in the case of Simplified,
that is fast math.
Yeah, or in the case of Simplified, have episodes which are not summarizing 2019 before the end of 2020. So
anyway, shall we move right along?
Yes. So let's begin with
since we have covered the A to Z of topics till now, it only makes sense to talk about Amazon. The A to Z, of course, being the arrow, the smiley arrow at the bottom. It goes from the A of Amazon to the Z of Amazon. So that's literally what that logo means, in case you did not know. No? Nobody? Okay, no, I did not get any surprise for this trivia of mine. This is what happens when I have a podcast with intelligent people who...
No, this is what bothers me. I knew about the A to Z.
Of course, everyone did.
I just stopped listening to you 2 episodes ago.
You're on the show with me. Don't act like cabinet ministers.
This is the most disrespectful gifts. I mean, it's not that we command a lot of it, but at least they end up giving it anyway.
No, the only way he's going to go from here is saying, hi, I'm Tony and I'm here with my guests.
Oh my god! But yeah, so anyway,
Apple level takeover.
Yeah. So the only thing that bothers me about Amazon is that the A to Z makes sense in the regular Amazon logo.
Yeah.
But in the Amazon Prime Video logo, it's just randomly going from one letter to another, and then I'm like, this smiley is useless now. It was all making sense then, but now it's just nonsense.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about the hegemony of Amazon, and when we talk about big tech and the backlash against it in the US, which we started this whole recap series with, Amazon occupies a unique place because they are different from the others in the sense they are not necessarily a software provider. They are still a retailer, in that sense. The hegemony, when I say Amazon, is this line that Jeff Bezos had last year, which should send chills across anybody's spine, which is your margin is my opportunity, which I thought was scary. And we've seen this in many ways. I think the most blatant way we've seen this is Amazon Basics. And most likely when you search for something on Amazon, you will find an Amazon version of that, be it batteries or towels or
USB cables.
USB cables, especially electronics. And you'll even cat furniture,
yoga mats.
Like they're getting into pretty much everything. And there's this whole debate about whether a platform should become a seller as well. So that whole thing is happening right now. But what's scary about Amazon is the way how they are approaching this whole takeover of the world sort of thing by not giving two hoots about sellers and their own employees, which is a big problem that they've faced, especially in the US, where people threatened to walk out on the eve of Black Friday sale, which would have crippled Amazon.
Wow.
And Jeff Bezos very reluctantly started doing work on climate, on this thing, on the whole going green thing, which Amazon was pretty silent about. But they are trying to get into other spaces like pharmacy. So to me, like for example, this whole hegemony of Amazon, when I'm talking about it, it's best summed up in one way. They let it slip that they're going to get into pharmaceuticals, and the stock prices of the 3 major pharma companies in the US just collapsed. Like, that's what it does. It's just a rumor of Amazon getting into a space
Maybe they just said we're getting into tablets.
Oh, well played, sir. Well played. Amazon has managed to, of course, reach where it is because of Amazon Web Services, AWS, which, typically people don't tend to equate that with Amazon, but it's basically they were the first cloud hosting company. They still command a huge part of the market. It drove them to profitability and allowed them carte blanche to do a lot of things. Ever since, reams and reams have been written about Amazon's corporate culture, both the positive side of things and the negative side of things. The negative side, there's a lot. So on the positive side, for instance, I don't know if this is positive as such, but for example, Jeff Bezos hates PowerPoint, and he asks all the pitches that need to come to him in a very tight format. What's it called, a 6-page document or something. He needs to be in a PR format or something. Just imagine that the product is released and now you're writing a press release, something like this. So there are lots of those type of stories, which has pushed innovation in one way, but now there's this whole thing that what's the point of creating anything, because Amazon is going to create a copy of it, which it can, because it's got lots of data and things like that. There's a European shoe brand called Birkenstocks, which I think is either a German brand or a Dutch brand, and they've actually taken their products off Amazon because, again, Amazon pulling muscle, whatever, and they still field a lot of queries because there are lots of fakes that are sold on Amazon. So Amazon refuses to do. So it's like
didn't Nike just do the same?
Nike also did the same thing. So, but there aren't that many Nike fakes, I'm guessing, where people just go and buy an I don't know if there are like sold on Amazon. I don't know. Birkenstocks are very hard to come by. So that must be the reason why. It's like how we say, right, there's fake news on a Google or a Facebook. It's like there are fake products on Amazon. It's like they have their own misinformation to deal with. This is, I don't know if it's something that's going to go away. This is most prominent when Amazon tried to muscle itself into, like when they wanted to set up a second headquarters. You remember they almost looked at the whole of the US and said, Nach.
And county started throwing like competitions and
stuff like that. And finally, when they came to New York, to me it was a tipping point when actually New York protested, and they actually took the HQ away from wherever it was, Staten Island or wherever it was supposed to be. To me, that was like, hey, we are not going to deal with this bullshit anymore. Enough of this. So I think that's that sort of that tech clash that we spoke about in the beginning, and Amazon's been on a particularly receiving end of it this year. So don't know how I can't say that everything looks rosy for Amazon right now. Even though I did say hegemony over here, I don't think it's all like stomp. I think that Jeff Bezos' allure has just gone off a little bit.
Hey, but in terms of the other things that we consume, right? Whether that's books in terms of reading or, audiobooks, where there's, basically there's Kindle, then there's Audible. Now there's Amazon Prime and Prime Video, and they've, I think recently, as last month, they've started streaming Premier League on Prime Video as well,
at least in the UK.
The UK. So
this was actually but with the Prime Video, in fact, it was so iconic that this was the first time since the inception of the Premier League television broadcast in the UK that the UK could watch all the matches at the same time. Because in the UK, there was no OTT platform that was broadcasting the Premier League. So they would depend on Sky choosing a certain number of matches on air. So there were other teams who could not watch their matches live at all. So this was Amazon Prime Video. And that's where I think it's the true rise of the OTT platforms about how that's the next step. That is the next step of how television becomes obsolete.
But so basically Amazon owns most parts of our life now, right? Whether that's
I wouldn't say
shopping
most
or
parts
entertainment.
because then you have the Google, who owns another part of the world. But to answer this is a very nice series that The Verge did earlier this year, where you had one reporter who went 1 week without each one of the tech platforms. When she was on the week without Google, she couldn't use Google itself, but also Maps and also Drive and things like that, which we rely so much on. When she tried to go without Amazon, that also meant not using websites that were hosted on Amazon Web Services. So that means she couldn't watch Netflix. Microsoft was easier to give up because the services are a lot more limited, and if you're on the Apple ecosystem, in any case, it doesn't matter. Couldn't use a couple of other things. And what was the other one? The Apple was difficult for her to give up, so she had to use Microsoft instead. And then she tried to go 1 week without all of these put together. It's a fascinating series, and her takeaways from that were pretty nice. And I think for her, if I remember correctly, Amazon was the most difficult to give up purely because of web services more than
how it's percolated through everything.
But for me, that would be Google. Easily, that would be Google for me. So yes, that is about Amazon. We can talk about Amazon and Jeff Bezos forever, but best to avoid.
So, moving from the Amazon,
pick it out of the hat.
Yeah. We still have the pretense of the hat, don't we? Now we don't even have chits inside it anymore.
I'm just going to wear the hat now.
Yeah, we're just going to rustle some random paper here and there and pick the next topic out, which is completely at random, called Brexit.
Oh, wow.
And
Yay.
Yay, indeed. This is, I think... while Donald Trump's craziness in the in the US has been quite entertaining, it's also because of its climate change implications quite depressing. But as a member of a post-colonial nation which has suffered quite a bit under the yoke of the United Kingdom, it is particularly joyous to see the clusterfuck that they call Brexit play itself out. And I think I think the end is near as far as the Brexit is concerned with some of the things. But just to give you a recap of what all happened in this Brexit saga. So we began 2019 with increasingly weary Theresa May trying to pass her Brexit bill through Parliament, trying once sometime in January and then failing, and trying again sometime later and then again failing. At which point she said, screw this, I am not going to be able to get this done, so let me take the back seat and see some other idiot try and fail at this. And she stepped back and allowed the UK's favorite cartoon called Boris Johnson to step in as the Prime Minister. Now Boris steps in and everyone expects him to be like this bumbling idiot which he had built. It's also an interesting thing to segue to take on Boris Johnson's persona, which is very, very carefully constructed to show him as a bumbling idiot, while he really is not. So he actually has done a lot of stuff that actually shows him as more ridiculous than he actually is. So it's a very interesting use of politics the way the man has done.
Yeah.
But anyway, what Boris Johnson's first step is to kind of please the hardliners, says that, oh, we will go for a hard Brexit if in case we will not extend the deadline and all that stuff. At which point his lack of mandate in the parliament came to the fore, where Jeremy Corbyn and the Liberal Democrats and all these guys stood up and prevented him from first dissolving parliament, second trying to avoid an extension and going for a hard Brexit. So they passed a resolution that enforced a Brexit deal to be minimum to exit the UK, and finally rejected every deal that he was proposing. So what he did was, in a very, very astute political move in hindsight, decided to call for an election, and a general election. And this was actually the winning of a big flaw of the parliamentary first past the post kind of democratic structure that the UK has. Where
thank God we don't have that.
But so that allows for the party with the maximum amount of votes to win, even though the majority of the people oppose a certain way of government, which happened when the Liberal Democrats and the Labour divided the majority of the vote and allowed the Conservatives to get the majority. So Boris Johnson won the election, even though he lost. He did not have the support of a majority of the country did not favour Brexit. So he won this election quite handily, handed Labour their largest defeat since Margaret Thatcher. And now, actually, just recently on 28th December, the withdrawal agreement has been passed by the House of Commons, which is Boris Johnson's deal, which is quite an appeasement of sorts, which will lead to massive unemployment in the UK, which will lead to really a lot of problem across the customs union and all that stuff. And the deadline that is currently agreed on, which looks like might just finally be followed because of the mandate that Boris Johnson has, is the 31st of January, which is the final flex tension, so to speak, that the EU has given the UK. And so Brexit seems to be finally winding down, but the drama and the idiocy and the decline of the Britain has just begun.
And to me, it's interesting to note to see how over the last 3 shambolic years, Europe's reaction has gone from shock to resignation to trying to compel them to stay for the longest period of time to now like chal just get out, because
screw this, let's just get this over with.
Because so how much of their time has just been sucked up trying to get this whole thing done. But happy for Europe. UK, best of luck to you.
So that's that with the Brexit scenario, and moving right along to our next topic, which we will pull at completely at random, of course.
Completely at random. I'll just ruffle to.
Very nice. Yeah.
This is simplified ASMR.
Oh my God.
I don't think that has to be an oxymoron, right? Simplified and ASMR.
Why? I would listen. Like, how many people have fallen asleep listening to us? If you think of that.
I think passing out in like pain is a different thing, Chuck. Anyway, the next topic.
Gully Boy.
Gully Boy.
Gully Boy. Yeah.
Go for it, Chuck.
Good shock. Huh? Nicely you pretended
to be shocked. From Brexit to Gully Boy.
Okay. Actually, I'm sure there are parallels you could draw, but anyway, Gully Boy, and it's very interesting. So I have been saddled the task of talking about a Hindi movie over here.
Well done.
So, I having watched about 17 Hindi movies in my life, including 2 of the Race franchise movies.
Super.
So,
Wow.
Thanks. Yeah,
and,
you know.
And you've also watched Gully Boy.
I also watched Gully Boy.
See, so percentage-wise, Gully Boy is like a large representation of your entire
Hindi
exposure.
movie.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So you should know a lot more.
Yeah. I feel that your logic is slightly flawed, but I will move on from there.
Also
Gully
could
Boy.
be the tagline of Simplified.
I like this new meme that's coming up. So Gully Boy is a movie that was released earlier this year. I remember because it was on the day after my last day at my previous company before I decided to become a full-time freelancer, and it was a movie starring
This is just as entertaining for us as it is for you listeners.
Arey, that dude, yaar, what's his name?
Go for it, Chuck. Come on.
Ranveer, correct. Correct.
Ranveer what?
Kapoor.
Well done. Sing.
Correct. Yeah. This is going extremely well.
I thought he'd start singing.
But Zoya Akhtar produced it. Yeah. This I see. I know the culture, the thing.
Only because your cat's name is the same.
Producer directed.
Produced and directed, I think. And
none of us are experts over here. Who
was the other?
Alia Bhatt.
Very good.
Please. That's all I know. And it was loosely based on the life story of Vivian Fernandez, aka Divine, who is he is an Indian rapper who raps in Hindi, and he talks about life on the streets. Okay, why this movie is important really is, and why we are talking about it over here, is because it sort of represents like how hip hop in India has moved from what used to be like a cult thing into sort of like the mainstream, right?
Yeah.
It was. I mean, I remember in 2000. I think it was 2013 or 14. I think it was 2014 when this thing Apna Time Aayega had come. Not Apna Time Aayega. What's that?
the Gali Mein.
Mere Gali Mein, which was by Nazy and Divine together. And I remember seeing it at that point of time and said, this has to be a joke or this is going to become extremely huge. And I, for some reason, knew it was going to be huge because just seeing the reaction of people around was like, you could see that there were people laughing at it, but also people were like, this is something unlike something I've ever experienced before, seen before. And you knew that this is a repeatable thing. And I was proved right. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the music myself, but that's just because of the type of music I consume.
Yeah.
But snob only. It's okay.
No, I think it was, I think what the big shift that Gully Boy represented, at least in Indian cinema, was the recognition of, I mean, it was earlier either rich urban culture or complete like hinterland culture. Hinterland culture. Like,
types,
so here what you had was a representation of the urban middle class, which was
Yeah.
very contemporary, which was exposed, had the access to the internet, had smartphone access, had access to international culture, and forming a subculture in India, which is an amalgamation of the two. And I think representing that, it was I think, like you said, the closest you could get to get Weekender made a movie. So and also what was also interesting, and from the entertainment point of view, how Ranbir Singh approached the movie was a very interesting way of looking at it, because mostly it's a role that people play. They might immerse themselves in the role, they may learn something, they may even sing the songs once in a while.
Like how this guy Purab whatever, he learnt the drums for
Rock On. But it's just a sampling of it. Like they learn one aspect of it. Ranbir Kapoor actually had
full
a claim. He in fact did events with the underground rappers, with the community. He immersed himself in the hip hop community. In fact, that's where it became a really important piece, that it was one of the first and only mainstream pieces that had acceptance from the community that was doing it, because they realized and they recognized Ranbir Singh as one of them. That he immersed himself so deeply in them, that he was a rapper. He was someone who met every one of them individually and kind of tried to represent their stories in the best way. So I think it was a real shift in the way Bollywood has just done surface level research. This was actually the first time there was a deep dive.
What I also like, and what I particularly liked about this sort of biopic, if you want to call it that, is that it's about a culture that's not made it yet. It's on the uprise, right? Like so many of the other biopics are of people who are legends already. Like Divine, probably I don't know about him enough, but I'm guessing he's like one of us who's just struggling to make his next gig happen, and it's probably easier for him now, but it's not like he was a superstar in that sense, right? That's what I think is kind of interesting, and there's definitely no doubt that Gully Boy is going to do more for Indian hip hop than Rock On did for Indian rock. For sure. Be it, I mean, you're already seeing that, right? You're seeing so much of hip hop now being accepted into other genres, including Bollywood itself. And if these guys are able to make a good living for themselves, in Bollywood, we call it selling out or whatever, but at least, hey, if they're making money off their craft, then
we just have to wait for what the Akhtars come out with next. From Rock On to Gully Boy to next.
Rock On 2 was already there, by the way. Rock On 2 is already made.
No, Rock On 2, Gully Boy 2, what next?
Rock On 2, Gully Boy 2. I don't know what other story is there to be made. Prog Metal Boy. Prog Metal Boy is not going to happen, no?
No, distinctly not.
It's like, unless it's like Star Boys or something.
Wow. We have entered the world of cult references.
Reference. I think 3 other listeners will get that. Anyway, that's Gully Boy. Of course, was India's nomination for the Oscars, but didn't make it, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
again,
fair.
Yeah, that's fair.
It wasn't like,
I haven't seen the others, but
movie ever made or anything.
It was enjoyable.
It was enjoyable.
Whatever.
I really like the Sour Grapes angle of it. Why do we need validation from the West? I'm like, हाँ ठीक है. Nomination जा रहा था बहुत बुरा था.
Okay, from real world, we will now.
And the next topic out of the hat. Metaphorical at this point.
Go on.
Is what I've written on the chit as football, but changes in football, and the biggest one of which is a VAR, which is video assistant referee. Now, people who don't follow football may just think, yaar, theek hai, third umpire aaya to who give a shit, right? I mean, it was just there, like nobody cared about it as much, but. The difference between VAR coming into football is that football famously has been a very human officiated sport for the longest point in time. Like till VAR came in, and like I think till goal line technology came in, which came in recently, football had no technology at all involved in officiating the sport. So what's made a big change, and since goal line technology was so successful because it was very objective and empirical in the way that it said whether the ball is over the line or not, and that was very clear. VAR was brought in with the same hope of it being like just an impartial judge of saying that, okay, it'll take certain elements and those certain topics will be judged by the video assistant referee. And the important part was it was supposed to be an assistant referee, video assistant referee. He's assisting the main referee in making a decision that the main referee may not be able to. So they also isolated like certain situations in which VAR would be used. So VAR was only used in situations of which would make really big changes to the match. Like for example, goal or no goal,
or penalty.
So so it was first is goal or no goal, which means that a ball. So if a goal has been scored or if a goal has been denied, has there been a penalty scored? There been a foul in the build-up? Has there been a handball or any offense or encroachment or anything like that? Any offense that happened in the build-up, which made the goal happen or prevented a goal from being from happening. Second being penalty or no penalty, like you said. So if a offense has been committed in the area and it's been ignored, VAR can spot it and say there was a penalty there. Or if a penalty has been awarded and there was no offense, it can chalk it off. Direct red card. So if a red card's been given straight up, evaluating whether the red card was valid or not is to be evaluated, as well as finally mistaken identity. Sure. So some people, this has happened quite often. In fact, that has also been a flashpoint from a racist point of view, where one black player committed a foul and another black player got sent off for it. And because earlier the review system was such that if a red card has been awarded, it has been awarded. That's nothing can be changed about that. But this one allows for the referee to change.
What about larger level mistaken identity? Like if a player just decides in the middle of the sit to sit down and like, who am I, for instance?
Existential crisis. My favorite identity story is from the last World Cup, where the South Koreans basically in training wore exchange jerseys with each other so that the scouts from European teams who were watching them couldn't tell them apart, so they had to rely on the jerseys. So, I would wear someone else's jersey and you would wear my jersey, and they were not able to tell apart the difference.
Oh, that's incredible. Like using racism to your advantage.
Exactly.
Incredible. So it seems like pretty straightforward, and when it was, and the biggest competition, of course, so it was implemented in the Champions League last year, and it went off fairly without a hitch. So there was the big flashpoint was when City got knocked out because of VAR, because they scored a goal and it was chalked off. So
this is against Tottenham.
Against Tottenham. So the last minute goal got chalked off because of that. So that was the biggest decision VAR made. And it was used in the World Cup as well, which also went off quite well. But the problem came when it entered the Premier League. Now in the Premier, as all good things go to shit. So this is actually, it's not as much a problem with the system. The system is a system. It's the same system everywhere. It's how you use it. And how the Premier League Referees Association has decided to use it is that they wanted to either make it overpowering in their usage, like defer common sense decisions to VAR, or ignore VAR altogether, or selectively use it. And that's created massive problems. So in the last 6 months or so, VAR has been constantly in the news because some decision has been passed off because some guy's armpit was offside.
Sure. Yes, I've seen
which
this.
is Roberto Firmino for Liverpool, as well as some millimeters offside. Someone's hair or shadow has been offside and stuff like that. Versus some other offenses which are pretty glaring, which have been caught by cameras and not been called out on VAR. So there has been a very selective usage of it. And as a lot of Luddites do, they prefer to blame the technology than blame the referees or the people who are operating it, saying that VAR is the problem and not the referees themselves. So that is where VAR is at. There's a huge go on.
In cricket now there's a parallel, because one of the things that was happening was the no balls in cricket were not being called at all. So now very recently they've started doing a thing where the third umpire calls the no ball. And an automatic no ball is called without the on-field umpire having to look at it.
And the problem that happens is the moment, so earlier when offside calls were made by estimation, it was an estimation, right? So you had good decisions or bad decisions, but it was up for whatever. But now if they're calling people offside by millimeters, they are like, can we determine what was the exact moment his laces left contact of the football, because that is also important to determine where offside is.
Amazing.
So they are all like, now if you're going into the detail, go into the detail fully.
Fully. I mean, I think detail fully will be, they'll have some MRI scanners now on the pitch to see whether intent was there for this penalty. I see it going that way. It might seem like a joke, but I feel it's there.
The honest truth is, the way VAR is being used right now is killing the flow of football. In my opinion. This is now again my opinion, where it comes down to, there was a game where there was a 2-3 minute stoppage where the officials were trying to figure out how this thing is there, and it totally kills the vibe of the game. right? It kills, but it kills the vibe of the game. People who follow football have known it.
Yeah.
Maybe it develops a new paradigm for how the way game happens.
Yeah.
Because interestingly, this has become another thing where coaches are now adapting themselves to VAR breaks.
VAR breaks, yeah.
So they are like, if there is a VAR decision going to happen, they are running onto the field with drinks and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Players are immediately starting stretches.
Yeah.
So they have been told that if a break happens for VAR, this is how you recover quickly.
Wow.
So game is adapting in itself also to stuff like this.
So should the world.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said
so
that.
that is the point about VAR.
And our next topic. Oh, sorry.
Before we move on to our final topic, since we've discussed cricket and football and everything else, I just want to share my favorite sports memory from the year, which is when South Africa won the Rugby World Cup.
Oh, wow.
Which was a moment beyond football itself. Because I think we've all seen Invictus, in 1995 when they won it after Mandela became... But in that team, there was only one black person, and he, I think, played only one match or whatever. But this time, the captain, Siya Kolisi himself, won the World Cup, and basically it triggered a moment of everyone saying, putting a hashtag which said, "I am staying," because in South Africa, currently the economic outlook is bad, everything is bad, but just about how sports can bring hope. So my favorite sports moment is from a sport I didn't watch.
No, that's really interesting to note also, because how, and now what we are watching is also on a larger tone, how sports and all of these entertainment avenues are now contributing to the political discourse of the time, where people are, because of sport, are now making political decisions, because of entertainment are making
which I feel we'll discuss in our next topic.
Yes, and moving right along, a slightly more nuanced topic.
Wow, nuance on Simblified.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Nuance for Simplified.
Yeah. So I think this is two topics kind of like linked to each other almost. One being the whole humanitarian crisis that's going on in Syria. So what largely very shielded from the world as such, because of the fact that the media doesn't like to cover a lot of this stuff, but there is a continuing humanitarian crisis. You've spent all of 2019, people in Syria have spent all of 2018 as well as 19 living in this crisis, where there are almost like mini genocides happening almost every other week. So people are of course fleeing that country in droves, and in Syria especially, what you're seeing is that there are multiple factions coming into play, and the whole point that we made maybe a last episode about the lack of a clear narrative is most evident in Syria, where there are so many different players coming into play, like the US, who was there, who was playing a certain part and now has withdrawn, allowing for Turkey to come in, who is being supported by the Russians, who have certain agendas in the region. So, and plus then there is ISIS, which is obviously painted as the big bad evil over there, and everyone's saying that, oh, we are all fighting ISIS, but everyone seems to have their own murky objectives and narratives in there. So what we know beyond anything is that the suffering is on the people of Syria. They are the ones who are getting bombed. They are the ones who are dying every day, and they are the ones who are becoming refugees and leaving. So last year we saw a huge spate of refugees leaving the country, leaving Syria and going to places in Europe as well as in the US and in Canada. But what has happened since is what is an interesting point. So a lot of these European countries which have welcomed, I'm talking about specifically ones that have welcomed refugees quite comfortably, which is countries like Germany, for example, which has welcomed over 2 to 3 million refugees in various parts of their countries. The way this has happened is that they have gone and settled in various cities. They've been resettled in various cities of Germany and stuff like that. And these guys have so what has happened here is, and Germany has taken a decision on a very calculated level. There are one being that okay, of course, what this means is, since majority of the refugees are Muslims, it changes the demographic of the country, which changes it to be more Islamic. It changes it to be more conservative. There are more opportunities for clashes between communities, and it also, in the long term, alters the way the demographics of the country are. But on the other hand, this is addressed a very real economic and social problem that these countries have. They have a negative growth rate. So they are now
population or economy?
From a population point of view. They also suffer from low. They also suffer. Wow, that is fucking ridiculous.
The low economy, right? I totally agree. You want to tell our listeners what you're reacting to live? It's okay.
This is Chuck, our sound engineer is taking pictures of all of us, and Chuck has decided to completely abandon the charade of using the hat and putting it onto his head now.
Yeah.
So yes, in that talking about Syria and refugees, but. The callousness of it all.
It's best summed up by our own apathy.
Yeah. So, what's happening is that these countries are now literally importing young people.
Yeah.
So instead of, because their life expectancies are really high, the populations are aging and they are suffering labor shortages. Importing these people is allowing these countries to get a younger workforce, a more diverse workforce.
And immigrants are an economic benefit.
They are a huge economic benefit because they are now filling up jobs that would not be normally filled up by people in the home countries, and allow the country a new lease of life as far as the economic boost is concerned. Yeah. So Germany and a lot of European countries are beginning to experience this. But of course,
just to your earlier point about how the culture might change and all of that, I think a lot of it also has to do with the lack of familiarity. I think there was this great piece about how just Mohamed Salah being a part of Liverpool.
Very much so. Yeah, that's a great
helped
example.
Fight their Islamophobia because now they have someone who they relate to and understand.
There is that article you're referring to, a beautiful article which talks about how in the UK, hate crime, especially in the Liverpool area, hate crimes have massively dropped since Mohamed Salah has, hate crimes against Muslims have massively dropped because of that. There are actually chants that have come up because of that, which Liverpool fans sing about how they sing, if it's good enough for you, it's good enough for me. If he scores another few, then I'll be Muslim too. And they're like, sitting in the mosque is where I want to be. And like, there are actually chants which are talking, glorifying Muslims. I mean, it's tongue in cheek, but it's about how they want to be Muslim because of him.
They do extremes, don't they?
Yeah, they don't do normal. They don't do normal. They
do guys play football in the middle ground.
No, it's either I'm going to be like racist or I'm going to go sit in a mosque. So it's one or the other. But yeah, that's a very important part about how these different cultures are coming in. And what it comes back to the whole Russell Peters, one of his lines in his stand-up shows was that in by 2050 there's an article that said that majority of the world will be brown. Yeah. So he's like,
we are all going to be a shade of beige.
Yeah. So he's like, ladies, you may run, but eventually we're going to hump you. So yeah, I mean that's where I think Europe and the rest of the world is also heading towards, and I think that's probably a reason we are seeing this huge backlash from the right wing of xenophobia, Islamophobia, the whole othering of people, and that's almost like a reaction to this globalization, which is inevitable, honestly. So that's a big point that we. So yeah, the European countries are importing their demographic dividend almost.
And at this point, I have to admit that I don't know enough about the crisis. I mean, we haven't spoken about this.
Yeah.
There are several. Okay.
Another, evident thing that happened last year when France won the World Cup, for instance, was when Trevor Noah spoke about, how basically it's Africa that's won the World Cup for France.
And that became a massive point about. So in fact, one of my creative directors is French as well. So I had a conversation with him about this, and what Trevor Noah's point was that why can't they be French as well as African? And he actually used this amazing analogy of the guy who had actually climbed the building to save a child. There's an African guy in France who had climbed the building to save a child, and he was rewarded with French citizenship. He was a migrant. So he's like, this is what the tragedy of the matter is, that when that guy was on the ground, he was African. Yeah. But the moment he saved the child was when he became French. So if he had dropped the child, he'd have remained African. But if he had saved the child, he remained French.
And so you're talking about immigrants helping one country winning one World Cup. This year when we had England winning this World Cup, we had Jacob Rees-Mogg, one of the most conservative idiots in the British Parliament, saying that, whatever, we didn't need Europe to win this World Cup. It's true that they didn't need Europe to win the World Cup, but they did need a New Zealander. They needed a Jamaican who was this guy, what's his name? Joffre Archer. And who are basically
even their captain is...
Even the captain, Ian Morgan, is Scot, right?
Irish, yeah.
So you have like that. There's a team that's built off.
Ben Stokes from South Africa.
Ben Stokes from South Africa.
Born in New Zealand.
Born in New Zealand. So,
and several more. Like,
and
an Indian, surely. They have an Indian, no, in their team somewhere. Some Patel, Monty Panesar.
Evidencing that the fact that England still is benefiting from the colonial empire. So, I mean, that's where, and with the World Cup thing again, there is that even progressive values, like where France, they talk about liberty, equality and fraternity, equality and fraternity, where their idea of being French is that when you become French, you eliminate all your other identities. And we now live in a world of multiple identities where you are able to accept the fact that I am this and that as well. So it's almost even destabilizing the old liberal values of saying that, okay, you assimilate into new identity. It's about inclusiveness of identity.
Wow.
So that is the point about how European countries are changing their demographic over a period of time.
And I think that's a great note, Srike, to end this year, which has been slightly crazy but ending slightly optimistically, I would say.
I feel more than where we were. Remember when we were doing like John Oliver doing 2018 and exploding that whole thing, and 2018 or was that 2017?
I forget.
2017. But he was like, I mean, where there was so much pessimism. I think there is more optimism at the end of 2019. More than, I mean, even though things seem to have gotten worse, there is more optimism.
Are we at hope?
But at this point, before we finally sign off, we haven't covered a lot. Like, I personally don't know enough about the crisis that's happening in Syria, Yemen, for example, which is still being called the largest humanitarian disaster on the planet. Africa, we've hardly touched, apart from South Africa a little bit, and here and there are lots of problems that are happening over there in that whole continent. I mean, there's so much that we haven't spoken about, and we've still yammered on for about...
That mostly speaks to our ignorance and lack of research than flashpoints there.
So but hopefully that's something that we'll make up in the next year, and hopefully there won't. And my hope is that next year, 2020 this thing, it actually becomes one episode instead of 4 episodes. Not for anything else. Not saying that. From our skill point of view, I just hope there is no news anymore. I'm just enough of the bombardment of, like, if I would, I can't list down like the top 10 stupid things Trump has done this year, for instance.
This week.
So I just hope that my hope is that we have less news next year.
Wow.
I have no pretensions of whether it's going to be good or bad. I just hope there's less of it. I think we could all use some time to just, sit and soak in whatever is coming.
That's a good point. Let's do my hope for 2020. Okay, so continuing on that, my hope for 2020 is, I think we referred to it a couple of episodes ago about how the government of the Netherlands passed a law enforcing climate change activism, enforcing climate change law effectively on people, and penalizing the government for not following it. And I think my hope for 2020 is more concrete action. Just what Greta has been going on about is that we've had enough of words, we've had enough of education. I think it's time for action, and my hope is for more action on climate change.
Wow. That are not okay, but you actually want Liverpool to win. That's your...
That is my... Yeah, that is unfortunately...
But that's also action only. Finally, enough of talking legacy. Finally, they're doing something.
I'm assuming climate change activism will only happen once finally Liverpool wins the league. So that is the hope. So yeah.
Oh, that's what they've been waiting for.
Hurry
up, bugger.
30 years
the pitch is getting wet.
Okay, Tony.
You're the most hopeful of the lot, anyway.
No, my hope for 2020 is for... medias to remain independent and possibly more viable media models to emerge. Like the Ken is profitable. I hope News Laundry is profitable.
Yeah. That is super important.
I think that's going to be the determining factor as all of our politics is getting more and more extreme. We need a better media. That's my hope.
Wow, well played. Simplified will hope to be one of them. I mean, we are media, no?
Speak truth to power.
Yeah, that's our new slogan after all that. After everything we've been through.
Summarize truth to power.
Summarize the truth to power. Simplifying the truth to power. Fair enough. Okay. That should do. So, thank you everyone for tolerating our nonsense. Like, may this tolerance extend itself to other aspects of life. So,
and or if nothing else, into 2020.
Into 2020. Stay safe, stay
hopeful.
united, stay hopeful. Yeah, sure. Stay hopeful. And, well, if nothing else, Simplified will be around.
Well
bye.
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 Remember the last vacation you took? What about the one you took 3 years ago? Okay, how much do you really remember? It's a question I've asked myself often over a decade of traveling the world. Hey, I'm Utsav, and I do not travel the world for a living. I have a full-time job and responsibilities, but I have made traveling the world a priority. Priority enough that I negotiate extra leave in my job contracts, obsessively track my frequent flyer miles, and I'm willing to take off at the sight of a cheap ticket. Yes, I am cheap. I have lived and worked in 3 countries. I understand human behavior for a living. And these experiences have given me unique insights into places, people, and culture. With over a decade of travel behind me, I increasingly realized one thing, that we cannot see everything. So whatever we see, we must see deeply. Because as the film of memory decays, the imprints which will stand the test of time are the ones felt by the immersion of the senses, not by fleeting encounters with them. Postcards from Nowhere is an immersion into the world of slow travel. One story at a time. Tune in every Thursday on the IVM Podcasts app, website, or wherever you get your podcast from.
Hi, my name is Anupam Gupta. I'm B50 on Twitter. I am the host of Paisa Paisa, the show that talks money. On my show, I speak to experts from every field of money and finance. From stock markets, equities, debt funds, credit cards, life insurance, every possible area of money and finance that you can think of. We even did an episode on cryptocurrency. I've got fantastic guests from mutual funds to personal finance experts everywhere. Robo-advisory, startups, just name it, we've got it. At Paisa Paisa, we help you make smart decisions about money. You work hard for money. Now make your money work hard for you. New episodes out every Monday, and you can listen to my show on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app that you have.